Oh, this is this shows the just a little bit of bona fides, shows the areas while I was in captivity we were tortured pretty heartily. This talks about the beatings in captivity in Southeast Asia. This was given to me in June '80 when I left active duty. One of the times I left active duty. I left active duty under several different names and went back in under several different names. So, as I continued through in 1978, I actually left active duty at one point. 1980, I was pulled back in, but I had to be pulled out immediately because they didn't want to use this in a military capacity. As I was pulled back and forth, as you saw, we would move in different capacities. My code name given to me by Colby was Pegasus. During my time as Pegasus, I worked for the CIA, I worked for the DIA, and I worked for the National Security Council. I put this up just for something for you to see. You hear the president today talk about assassinations, how assassinations aren't allowed. We cannot target an individual. We cannot target an individual. We cannot target an individual. But what we can do is we can determine by national security finding that an individual has violated international law, and we can go after that person to recover the documents and arrest him and bring him under the jurisdiction of the federal jurisdiction in the United States. And if it happens that you have to exceed existing field training manuals, you may do that. We cannot assassinate, but we can protect ourselves as agents. This was my handler when I went back in 1980. I was sent to Fort Campbell, Kentucky. Fort Campbell, Kentucky was a staging area in the 1980s, early 1980, to pick up the slack in what we found we had some problem areas with special operations. Many of you remember the Iran problem where we attempted to go into the desert in Iran. Our aircraft crashed into one another as we were trying to bring hostages out of Iran. The problem that we had there is we didn't have a task force in place that could do that could utilize those services, that could work together. You know, we had Navy aircraft that weren't used to operating in sand environments, so basically the sand got into the air filters of the aircraft and broke down the hydraulics in the engines in the aircraft. So we weren't able to function properly. We decided we needed a task force made specifically for anti-terrorism. That task force was named Task Force 160. It's today the 160th Aviation Regiment Special Operations Group. But back then, it was Task Force 160. We built the task force at a place called Fort Campbell, Kentucky. At Fort Campbell, we brought in CIA assets. We brought in old Air America pilots. We brought in National Guard pilots. We brought in all kinds of assets, put them in military units at Fort Campbell, and the military unit would then assign them across to Task Force 160. We had a special place on the CAV airfield, Cavalry Airfield, on the back side of Fort Campbell that we flew out of. Many of you know Task Force 160 today as the black helicopters that you see flying around. I was a pilot for Task Force 160 for 4 years and a command element at Task Force 160. So perhaps in our seminar, I think that's Sunday evening, we'll get into Task Force 160, what their actual mission is, how we fly, why we fly, and exactly what we do or did. At Task Force 160, we had an aircraft crash. One of our night vision goggle aircraft and Task Force 160 were painted black because a helicopter is a very slow aircraft. It has to have some type of advantage. Otherwise, you're just a sitting duck in a helicopter. We found that in Vietnam. So our advantage was night flight. So what we did is we developed our night flight techniques. We flew hundreds of hours at night under night vision goggles. We flew not only in night vision goggles, but at night in clouds. Army aviators, Army safety officers would go crazy when they'd hear that a task force flight was going to take off in a thunderstorm, because it's just against all existing regulations. As we trained, with so many hours, we found that we started getting a rash of accidents. One of those particular accidents was a major, one of our unit commanders in what's called the Little Birds. That's a small Loach. It's a round aircraft. The Defender is a, where have you seen one? Magnum PI? Yeah. Okay, the helicopter used in Magnum PI is a Loach. We have a military model, they have the civilian model. A Loach hit a high power line in Dover, Kentucky. Our commander was killed. The warrant officer with him had his legs severed. The warrant officer is still alive today. But in the post-crash investigation, a man from Washington came in. The man from Washington identified himself as Jake, and the man that was with him we nicknamed because he wouldn't identify himself, but he was kind of a tall, lanky, slimy guy. We named him Snake. So we had Jake and the Snake that came in. We had to fly him to the crash site through the investigation. Jake and the Snake maintained with us for about 3 days. I would later find when I was transferred to a new unit at Fort Stewart, Georgia, that Jake's real name was Oliver North. Lieutenant Colonel North knew that a tasking was coming down because, being a member of National Security Council, they had the plans and programs for the military. Unfortunately, during the Iran-Contra affair, the Boland Act came out, and in the Boland Act, we weren't allowed, military or the CIA, was not allowed to participate in any means in providing intelligence or logistics to the Contras. Now, let me give you a little history here. The Contras were the revolutionaries, because the CIA went to them and said, look, we want you to rebel against the Sandinistas and all that's going on here. We'll provide the money, we'll provide the arms, we'll provide your food, we'll provide protection if you'll go into this war. So we got them to start the war. All aspects of the war were in place. What we couldn't do, however, was follow through with that. So we got these men and these women into these large Contra camps around the border area. These large Contra camps were to be supplied by the CIA, but Boland came out, one of our congressmen, had this amendment that came out that didn't allow us to participate in any way except humanitarian. So we decided, how can we get around this? Does that sound familiar today? How can we get around this law? Well, let's put our agents in as medevac pilots. So I became a medevac pilot flying Hueys in Honduras. The one thing I found when I was briefed initially was, and in our flights, is we were always carrying medical coolers. These medical coolers were marked, medical supplies, huge white coolers, 120-quart coolers. My handler in country was a man named Felix Rodriguez. Out of country was Colonel North. We had a Washington switch number that we'd call from the task force headquarters, Joint Task Force Bravo in Honduras, to communicate. If I couldn't get Major Rodriguez, Felix was introduced as Major Rodriguez, U.S. Army Intelligence. Felix Rodriguez, in reality, was a confidant of Vice President Bush and was a CIA operative. And actually, Rodriguez was involved in the assassination of, I think it's Che Guerrera, in the early years. On this particular day, let me give you just an example, the 26th of February, I made a flight. These were the members of the crew. This is where we went. These were the passengers. We had a man named Cooper and Sawyer. In 1986, you would read about 2 men who died as a plane flew into Nicaragua and was shot down. 1 man survived. Cooper and Sawyer were the pilot and the co-pilot. You can leave it. Cooper and Sawyer were the pilot and co-pilot. I picked up Cooper and Sawyer in a Contra camp and brought them into a local airport. When we came out of the Contra camp, we had a cooler. We came in for a landing, and we came in a high DA day and a lot of equipment on board the aircraft, and I bounced. And when we bounced around, the cooler's seal broke. Cooper and Sawyer went ahead and got on an aircraft and took off and went back to El Salvador, where they were based. I took a look at the cooler, and I immediately sent my crew in to get something to eat. They were military. They had no idea what was going on. So I sent the crew in to get something to eat at La Mesa Airport, where we had just flown into. When I opened the cooler, there was a number of large bricks, all wrapped in a medical wrap of plastic. These large bricks, when I opened one up and touched it to my tongue, made my tongue numb. I suspected then that it was probably cocaine. Over 110 of these bricks, I had counted 110, but probably missed a number of them, were in this cooler. I asked the Air Force personnel who were to pick up the cooler where it was going, and they said it was going to Dr. Harari, medical supplies, supposedly, going to Dr. Harari in Panama. Now, Dr. Harari's real name is Mike Harari. He's a Mossad agent who was tasked to General Noriega as his briefer. So I decided then I better do something about it. I called Felix Rodriguez, and I told Major Rodriguez, hey, you know what's in here? There's cocaine in this thing. And he said, yeah, it's okay. We know about the cocaine. It's coming from the world courts. It's coming as evidence in the world courts. It's going to be simply sent as evidence. We won't we won't pass this on to anyone else, will we, Chip? I said, no, you know, that's fine with me. But I knew then that I had to make a note. So when I would land, these flight plans were all filed with base operations at Pomeroy Air Base. When I would land, I'd come back and I'd put notes about what I found on board my aircraft. And I did that for a period of 3 months. In 1992, I left service of the CIA and basically retired. In 1994, I was contacted by Oliver North and told, we want those documents. You see, all of these flight plans were put in the hands of a trusted Honduran official who had them all. And it told everything. And we're going to go through those flight plans in just a minute. We're going to walk through and you're going to see some of the most famous names you've ever heard of making trips into that country, and what they had to say will amaze you. So what I did is I contacted, when he told me to give those documents up or else, I contacted a friend and in Honduras and told him, we really need to get these flight plans, folks. Can I get copies of them? He said, yeah, come on down. So I took my wife, Nancy. We went down to Honduras. We were followed. Fortunately, we were able to break the tail pretty easily. I don't know what they're doing with these guys today, I'll tell you. I picked up the flight plans, and we came back in. We flew into Miami Airport. We were living in Colorado at the time. After arriving in the Miami Airport, we went through customs, got a rental car in a hotel room. I left my briefcase in the car, left the car unlocked. I had the documents taped to my body. The following morning when we got up, the car had been broken into, the briefcase was gone, and in my briefcase was the keys to my car. They had the keys to my car. So we got to Colorado Springs finally that afternoon, and Nancy had a spare set of keys, so we were able to drive home to Denver. Within 2 weeks, the FBI was at our door. They wanted the documents. I told them I don't know where they are. They arrested me. They threw me in jail. They told Nancy to take her belongings, take the clothes on her back, and gave her, I think, $30 out of the money that we had, seized all of our assets, told her to take her car and leave and never come back. When I was in a federal holding cell, I was told that by federal agents that if I didn't give the documents up, I'd be charged with treason. I said, get out of town. I was charged with treason. They told me if I didn't get life, I would at least, if I didn't get put to death for treason, I would spend the rest of my life in prison. And I said, guys, you're not getting those documents. Because if I give them to them, I'm toast. Yeah. So there's no way. So I thought about it, and I contacted Nancy. You know, if the phone is a lifeline when you're in a federal holding cell. I contacted Nancy, and I told her, Nance, get those copies and get them into me. You know, make copies of them, get them into me. So she came on a visit, and she snuck them into me. We got them. I was able to put together the documents for these guys. So what I did, as I called them up a couple weeks later, I said, fellas, I'm ready to give you those documents. We made copies of them and published them in a small book. We sent them to Capitol Hill. We sent them to the White House, and I called the Secret Service agents and said, come on and get them. I handed them to them, and then within weeks I was on what's called diesel therapy around the country. The last thing they wanted to do was let any of these people talk to me. So we went from county to county, chained and shackled from county to county around the United States. It took me 6 months to finally get into Tampa, Florida, where the trial was held. But during the trial, since all of our assets were taken, we could not defend ourselves. We had to rely on public defenders. Well, let me tell you something about these public defenders. They told me that if I didn't go through, if I didn't give them, she would be charged with me, and Nancy was charged with me. But they couldn't go through with the treason charge, so they went through with a charge called conspiracy. That's a thought crime. Conspiracy means you have talked to someone else and considered a course of action which would break the law, break some law. So they decided I conspired to make a false statement to a federal officer. And I told them, there's no way you can prove that. Well, there is a way they can prove that. All they do is they bring in what's called an informant to say that you conspired. And under existing law, if this person comes forward and says you conspired with him and there's any overt act showing that you conspired, even a telephone call to a federal officer, doesn't even have to be testimony from the federal officer that you talked to him, just a phone log, then you did it. That's the conspiracy law, folks. And it's very, very dangerous for every single American and everyone overseas, because they can extend their arm overseas and bring them back. Look at Noriega. In the conspiracy law, you don't have to commit the act. You just have to think about it. It's called the thought crime. Well, I knew they didn't have anyone to testify against us, so I said, okay, let's go to trial. And who'd they bring in? They brought a guy named Bill Lusinger in, who was one of the campaign managers, retired lieutenant colonel for the United States Marine Corps, campaign manager for Ollie North. I was toast, Nancy was toast, and there was nothing we can do about it. But what was it that bothered them so much? What was it that I had in those documents? I want to go through those real quick because I know there are other things that we want to get into. As we would fly around Honduras, we would fly into the Contra camps and into 3 separate areas. Okay. Those 3 areas were a place called San Lorenzo, where there was an airstrip. There was a place called Pomarola Air Base, which was the Air Academy of Honduras. And on the north end of the country, there was a place called La Mesa Airport. We would use medevac helicopters. We would fly into these areas. We would pick up the coolers, drop off coolers, pick up coolers. Sometimes we'd even do, we'd have our crew members would actually work on patients. Not very often, though. I mean, we're talking about money here. Time is money. Coolers are money, especially those coolers. On this particular occasion, we picked up 2 coolers, marked medical supplies. The containers had a white powder, approximately 100 bags each. During my time in Honduras, I carried 8 tons of coolers. Now, I don't know how much cocaine goes for, folks, but any of you that have a calculator and have an idea how much a kilo goes for, you can see that that's a lot of money. On the 24th of March, I was tasked to go to a place called El Acatal. I was to fly several people there to meet with General Noriega and a man named Bill Barr. Bill Barr would later become the Attorney General of the United States under the Bush administration. General Noriega and Barr were there. Joe Fernandez, the station chief for the CIA, was there. While we were there, it was discussed that there was $100 million missing in what's called the Enterprise. Now, the Enterprise is a self-sustaining company to make money. In the 1970s, it was decided that the CIA could not operate in covert operations without Congress's permission. In other words, if we needed money to do a covert operation, we had to go to the CIA, or the CIA had to go to Congress. Congress had to look at the whole plan and say, okay, we're going to give you X amount of dollars to do this. Well, let me tell you something. That didn't work. We knew that wouldn't work. A congressman can't keep any kind of secret. So there's no way that would work. So we decided what we would do is we would self-fund ourselves. And we self-funded. This is one of the areas. The Enterprise was one of the self-funding entities and continues to be a self-funding entity. Many of you heard the San Jose Mercury News report that the CIA was involved in trafficking crack. Well, you got to watch how you say things to the government and how these federal investigators work, because if you ask the question wrong, they're going to answer what you ask. The CIA was not involved in crack. They didn't care what it was made into. They were involved in moving cocaine across the border. But the investigation was dealing with crack. On that occasion, it was decided that these entities, we had 3 tracks coming back into the United States, all of them based out of Panama, Panama to Colorado, Panama to Ohio, and Panama to Arkansas. Many of you have heard about the MENA connection in the Arkansas. It was decided that the Panama to Arkansas connection was the one that where the money was missing, over $100 million. And they also decided that it was one of 2 people in the meeting, and when we went out to call the vice president to let him know on the SATCOM that we brought with us where it was, when Mr. Barr spoke to him, he said, I would suggest that it's not any one of these entities, speaking of Noriega, speaking of the governor of Arkansas, Bill Clinton, and speaking of the man who was actually flying the stuff back and forth, Barry Seal. So I think it's a little bit of all of them. Harari was taking a little bit out for Noriega. Noriega was taking a little bit out for Noriega. Seal was taking his percentage out as they go in. And it doesn't take a long time for $100 million to build up over the years, you know. I was there in '85. This had been going on since '83. And I was only one aircraft. Who knows how much was taken before then? So it was decided that one of these people definitely was involved. I'm going to read this to you so you understand what was said. We flew into a particular contra camp, and in this particular contra camp, there were discussions going on. And it says we flew North Rodriguez and Dr. Gus. This was on March 30th of 1985. Dr. Gus was actually Gustavo Alvarez. He was the Chief of Staff of the United States, or Chief of Staff of the Army for the Honduran military. He was the end we had in Honduras. And Amir Amnir. Amir Amnir was the representative of the Mossad. To Rus Rus, outside of main camp, a cocaine kitchen was operating by the Contras. Went to Santa Ana, another cocaine kitchen operated by the Contras. North said Vice President Bush was going to take care of Seal and Noriega. I was standing by a vat of leaves, and I couldn't believe what I was hear him saying as North was talking. Now this is just, you know, hearsay. I can't say that Vice President Bush said that, but I can certainly tell you what North said, and this is up to you to discern. He said he was going to take care of the Arkansas Hicks, is how they actually put it. Speaking of Seal, who was basing out of Arkansas at the time, and Clinton. But they said they were going to take care of Noriega also. They spoke, boy, that's terrible handwriting. I can't believe I wrote so bad. Oh, here we go. They spoke about a meeting in Costa Rica 6 days previous. Said when Barr spoke to Bush via SATCOM, the vice president ordered Seal and Noriega to be taken out. When Barr handed me the phone, Bush seemed to be very agitated. He wanted the serial number of Seal's aircraft, so I gave him the serial number when we delivered Noriega back to the airport, and I think it was San Jose. He told me that these men were out of control. This shouldn't be happening, do you understand? Well, when the vice president tells you, Tatum, this shouldn't be happening, do you understand? You say, yes, sir. I didn't have a clue what he was talking about. But now, after hearing what North said, it's into perspective. It'd be pretty easy to put a cooler marked medical supplies on Seal's plane, but one like it that we put on Torrijos' plane. Torrijos' plane, who was the president of Panama, Torrijos his plane blew up. I was told by Colby that a cooler marked medical supplies was put on his plane. And the reason they do medical supplies, let me tell you, it's a humanitarian effort. People never check it, you know? Donor organs, eyeballs. Gee, I think I even read something about eyeballs on TWA Flight 800, huh? There was a cooler. You know, it's just never checked. That's the one thing, because it's a humanitarian effort, that goes unchecked. And that's how Torrijos came down. So I figured, you know, if they were going to take him out, they were going to go in that arena. A business deal gone bad is all Just Cause was. Just Cause was the attack on Panama. The orders to Bob Hunt, SEAL Team 2 commander, was kill Noriega. Noriega was too quick. He had too many contacts in the CIA. SEAL Team 2 was working for Vice President Bush, or President Bush at the time. The CIA was still the friend of General Noriega, and so they told Noriega, go get refuge, we're coming in. I was tasked to fly in. I flew in a Hansa jet, picked up Mike Harari 1 hour before the invasion. As a matter of fact, talking to Bobby Hunt, he said, I saw your jet leave. I thought they were going to shoot you down out there, because they were tasked to take down any aircraft that tried to leave the area. They were afraid Noriega would be trying to escape. Fortunately, I put that baby, I mean, it must have been a huge wake on the ocean, and as I flew that thing across the ocean. Okay. Just Cause. A business deal gone bad. We're going to get those Arkansas Hicks. What's that tell you? Who were the Arkansas Hicks? Seal, Barry Seal. Where's Barry Seal today? He's dead. He was killed, as they put it, by a Colombian, but the man who actually killed him, who's in prison today, because when I went to federal prison waiting for the appeal, I was put in a prison where this man was held. The man was actually a Cuban working for Southern Air Transport. Now, Southern Air Transport is owned by a man named Richard Secord. This guy was a mechanic for Southern Air Transport. Seal's aircraft was sold to Southern Air Transport, the fat lady. That's the same aircraft that was shot down in 1986 over Nicaragua. Small, such a small circle of good friends. Okay, you can go on to the back some. So we have a business deal gone bad. We have Seal gone. We have Noriega in prison for the rest of his life, but that leaves one guy, huh? Let me tell you something about CIA Director Bush, who was my handler, because Colby was my handler. And when Bush replaced Colby as the director of the CIA, I was passed on. I was pulled out of Yugoslavia, where I was looking for American prisoner of wars at the time, brought into Langley, debriefed by Colby, rebriefed by Bush, and put back out in the field. CIA Director Bush, Vice President Bush, and then President Bush was one of the most powerful men alive, and is still one of the most powerful men alive. This young governor crossed by President Bush, and he has vowed to get even. So what I will suggest to you today is a way that he's trying to get even. You know, when you're in a nefarious and notorious activities, you don't just go kill someone if you really want to get even. I mean, that's bad enough, you're killing someone. But if you build them up and then knock their legs out from under them, isn't that a much more effective way of doing business? Boy, I love the way I was taught to think. So what I'm going to suggest to you today is that when Bush left, I was told that he bugged the White House. Well, you can't just bug the White House. You can't just take bugs and put it in, because it's swept all the time. But you can bug the White House with human intelligence. You can bug the White House with top aides, with White House personnel who may work in travel offices, who knows. Or maybe a secretary like Linda Tripp, who was associated with the CIA, who was associated with the Pentagon and the Defense Intelligence Agency and the National Security Agency. Associated with. It's an indicator, that's all I can say, and I deal in indicators. My whole life I survived because we deal in indicators. There are no real givens. Things can change from day to day. But the real scary part is that on November 12th of this year, William Jefferson Clinton placed us in a state of national emergency. This comes directly from the White House, folks. Very quietly placed the United States in a state of national emergency. He did it stating that there was a threat of the use of weapons of mass destruction. And now for him to proliferate this and take it further, he has to define in the Declaration exactly what that threat is. And if that threat comes to fruition, it is then his place to declare martial law and take Congress out of the loop. Okay? Here's his threat. Because of the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, an extraordinary threat to the national security, foreign policy, and economy of the United States, the national emergency declared on November 14th, 94 is extended. Proliferation of nuclear, biological, and chemical weapons. A friend from the White House sent me this. I had no idea. That friend is in the Secret Service on presidential staff. The friend said, Chip, you got to put this out there. You got to let them know. And this is what this friend said. And I'll just give you all a second just to read that so you understand what the step. Can you read it? Tough to read? Want me to read it? Okay. On November 12, 1997, the following document was released to the American public. The wording is quite descriptive and needs not be addressed. However, we should look into the purpose of the document and ask, why is it necessary for the President to put such a document into effect? He tells us that things couldn't be better, except for that gnat from Iraq nipping on his ass. Since the press release only references Title 50 of the United States Code, it really doesn't spell out what the President is up to. So here it is. Title 50 allows him to put us into a martial law. That's what it comes down to. It takes power from Congress. There is no longer any investigations. So if a president thinks he's in trouble, if he can put himself into a Title 50 situation, it's done. There's no more Congress to keep investigating.
No Constitution.
The Constitution gave him that power. Through the years, the new Constitution, I should qualify that. A close White House source, Secret Service presidential detail. Fearing to be involved with a violation of federal law, misprison of a felony, Title 18, Section 4, told me that the President has impaneled a small trusted group of legal minds. They're charged to identify the options available or needed to extend Clinton's administration beyond its current term. Here's the result of that think tank. 1, extend the national state of emergency as defined. He did it, November 12th. 2, cause an event which is defined under this code: nuclear, biological, or chemical weapon threat, not use threat, okay? The event must be by use of a weapon of mass destruction. Listen to Clinton. He's using the clause in virtually every speech he makes. They started building that clause. The event does not have to take place within the boundaries of the United States. All it has to do is be targeted against the United States. In other words, a terrorist threat or a threat against our forces. Back Saddam into a corner. Make him use what he's got. If you back him in and he's not going to survive, what's he going to do? He's going to use it. We're backing him in. The event does not have to take place within the boundaries of the United States. Once that event has taken place, the President can extend his powers, take Congress out of the lawmaking business by agreeing to consult with them as it's defined from time to time. It doesn't even have to be face-to-face by the way the law is written. All he's got to do is send a memorandum once every 6 months. Hey guys, still there? Good, see ya. That's consulting from time to time. Since it isn't, it's just not described how he has to consult. Put the law and order into the hands of FEMA. That's how the new definition is. And the man who has just been moved to Washington, D.C. to replace Witt in FEMA is a man called Buddy Young. I don't know if you all know Buddy Young, but he happened to be Clinton's security chief in Arkansas when he was governor. He was a man that posed as a National Guard officer in the back of my aircraft that we taped and provided to a federal judge in our trial in Florida. And the federal judge listened to the tape, looked at the transcript, and said, it's not relevant to this trial. In the tape, they lined out the use of cocaine, the trade of cocaine, and so forth, and Buddy Young was very familiar with everything, very cooperative with the whole effort. So Buddy Young is Clinton's boy and getting ready to take over FEMA. This would require a cooperative and trusted FEMA chief be in place. Clinton's chief of security while governor of Arkansas was Raymond Buddy Young. Young was appointed Region 6 FEMA boss in Clinton's first presidential term. Young has recently been moved to offices in Washington, D.C. Will the present FEMA chief step aside quietly? I added this myself. Or will he be browned out? Speaking of Ron Brown. Okay.
Are you implying Ron Brown was assassinated?
I'm implying that there is a good possibility that Ron Brown was shot. Remember it said cause and event? We have a real problem going on with our United Nations right now in that the Secretary General of the United Nations has just gone to Iraq to smooth things over, and Iraq seems to be cooperating, don't they? Iraq is saying, okay, we give up. You can come look at everything we've got. So now Clinton's got a problem. In the business, you always have a contingency plan. Weapon of mass destruction. If we can't attack Iraq, all he's got to do is start building it right here. All he's got to do is start building the public awareness that there are cells here in the United States that are willing to release a weapon of mass destruction. Larry Harris, wrong place at the wrong time. Happened to have a vial that is described as anthrax serum on him. Dealing with an FBI informant. FBI informant's name was Ron Rockwell. He was here at Congress last August. The informant stated that stated that Larry took the stage and told the people in a group meeting last summer that he could put a vial in the New York subway or something like that. I don't know. I wasn't in there at the time, but so here we have another informant on the payroll, working for the man, whoever the man might be. I think our time is just about up, folks.
10 minutes.
Okay, good. Many of you might seem to think that I might have a devious mind to even bring this forward to you or even suggest this, but let me tell you something, folks. I've helped assassinate 17 people for these people. Do I have a devious mind? No, I have a real mind. You have a naive mind. Because we have hid from the American public most of what we've done through my career, and it's short, it's only 2 decades. But 2 decades can go a very long ways.
Was Colby murdered too?
I don't know. I can tell you something about Bill Colby because he was my handler and he was my friend. Bill Colby, whenever we would fly on board our aircraft, would always insist that we all put on our water wings. And if you're a pilot, you know how much a hassle is that. We never wear water wings when we fly over water, but he had a fear of drowning. He would always wear that vest when he was on board his canoe, and he didn't have his vest on. So, you know, I have to say, if you look at what went on, I have to say that it looks like assassination style to me, just from what I've seen in the past and what I've done in the past. That's personal experience. I'll take about 5 minutes of questions. I want to say one more thing. Do the American hostage thing. What I'd like to tell you about real quickly, and to change the subject, is there are 3 men that have been held hostage, okay, going to the next one, for the last 5 years. 3 American citizens that the Department of State has done absolutely nothing to affect the release. They haven't even done anything to find out where these men are being held. All they know is they were taken out of Panama in an area called the Darien Gap, which is a prime drug running area. They were taken out of Panama and they were moved to Colombia, northern Colombia by FARC. 6 men were originally taken. 1 has been set free. 2 were killed. 3 remain. Ted Gunderson, who will be here speaking tomorrow, is the director of the American Hostage Foundation. On behalf of him and others who wish to remain anonymous, we want to make you aware that it is a very valid effort. Please write your congressman. We have flyers over here, and ask them to find out what's going on and affect the release of these men. You know, they're young fathers. Their kids haven't seen them for 5 years. Their wives haven't seen them for 5 years. We have the assets to go in and attack another country, but we can't find out where these 3 guys are. I'll open it up for questions. I think there's someone at the microphone.
Hi, Chip, I wondered what you think of the idea if all of us had a copy of that document, the directive that went out from the president declaring martial law, and if we each took a copy of that, went home, made copies, one for congressman, one for each of the 2 senators of each of our states, if that would alert some people, and if that would help, and anything else, any other person you can think of that would help, well, maybe you could state it.
I think that it's a valid effort to contact your congressman and tell them about it, but I think they know about it.
You mean they don't mind being put out of business?
Oh, they mind quite a bit, but you have a man who's getting ready to be indicted in some sort of way, who's taking a last-ditch effort not to let it happen. It's not a concentrated effort. It's an individual who is also lashing out to save his butt. What I'm trying to say is I think that Clinton, our president, committed a crime. That's my opinion. And I think that Clinton, our president, needs to, like everyone else who's committed a crime, stand before a judge. But Clinton doesn't think that way. You know, he has his own definition for things, believe me. We've all heard some of those definitions.
Well, perhaps some of the talk shows in the area could get the copy.
I agree. And if you could take this document and pass it out and give, the general public really isn't aware. How many of you were aware that we were in a national state of emergency? And this is a more informed group than most.
Don't you think Kenneth Starr is a lot more dangerous? To me, I'm scared of him. You know, the grand jury process.
I think every American citizen should be afraid of the power that a federal prosecutor has. They have a power that is absolutely goes unchecked. And Nancy can tell you about that. In her book, Joining Club Fed, she talks about this power, how they can intimidate. They called Nancy in, the FBI did, and told her that I could testify against her in a court, or how did it go? You can't testify against me, but I could testify against you, and if you would turn state's evidence, they wouldn't do anything. This is how they play things. You know, they went to my parents. They told her that they told my mother, she's pretty elderly. I'm not a chick, young chickadee. Told her that they were going to come kick in the door if they didn't participate with them. I mean, these are terrorist tactics. Intimidation, coercion, that's how they work.
To me, Kenneth Starr committed treason by giving us a bad name, because this is just a game, because that's why Saddam Hussein is doing what he's doing.
Well,
he wouldn't be daring.
Treason's a pretty tough word, you know.
To me, it's treasonous. In
it
the old
requires
days, that
the
would
use
be
of force,
considered treason.
though.
It would have been considered treason in the old days. And to me, that's more treasonous than what Clinton was doing. He was stupid, you know. But Kenneth Starr is dangerous, and his behavior, to me, is treasonous.
What's the question?
You know, the way we are.
Is there a question?
looked at.
Well, you're not there to make a statement. Please ask your question.
What's that? Well, I did. I asked him, don't you think that Mr. Kenneth Starr is more dangerous?
All right, he already answered that.
You
Next
know.
question.
Hi. I had heard that much of the Iran-Contra money went to fund the election campaigns of 1998. Do you believe that that would be true? Oliver North's campaign and the others that participated from different states, both sides, Democrat and Republican?
You know, there's no better way to pay a person for their loyalties than to have them run for office and let them keep the proceeds when they don't get elected.
I have, okay, one other thing I'd like to say. In February of 1987, Ronald Reagan lost his memory after wanting to reveal the Iran-Contra tapes. The same week, William Colby was hit on the head, plus somebody else I know. And Don Aronow, who was George Bush's, speedboat pal, he was murdered that week. Did you have anything to do with the murders of that week?
It's a good question.
I'm just curious.
I've been to prison once, no.
All right. All right. And I just
Let me say this. The reason I went to prison is because I refused to neutralize an American citizen to begin with.
All right. Okay.
Intelligence officers around the world are fair game. We all know that. But American citizens are not.
I'd just like to say that in the 1970s, I had just come to America, and I'd never heard of the CIA, and I ended up working for them. And I know that we trained Saddam Hussein's secret police, for whatever
Sure.
that's worth.
Sure we do. Yeah. We delivered the biologicals over to him that we're afraid he's going to use. You know, you have
Another
some of the best spiritual minds in the world here right now. Get to work on the leaders. That's what I say.
Well, I know somebody who's in the FBI, so I, for one, am going to call him and suggest that Mr. Harris is innocent and exactly what I know about Mr. Harris, and talk to him about his book. I'm wondering if it would help if anybody here knows, maybe in a church, somebody who's a retired FBI who would know people who are connected, or anybody in their local FBIs who would know about and who could explain as character witnesses. We're all here. We're all character witnesses to we have all heard what Mr. Harris has talked about. He's never talked about Aryan nation anything. Maybe he is, maybe he isn't. But that's nothing to do with it in any case.
Well,
but he has said he's always talked about defensiveness.
But the issue is
defending
Mr.
against
Harris had in his
biological.
possession anthrax serum, which is against the Anti-Terrorism Act. That's the issue, and that's what Larry is going to have to address, not what he was going to do with it, that he had it in his possession and it's a violation of code. That's what it'll come down to. I know, I've been there.
Well, I do know that he already before his arrest had talked with a newsman in the Radio Shack that they'd run into, he and Mr. Levitt.
He still has to
And-
address the fact that he had an illegal substance on his body. That's what it is.
they came clear as to what
Doesn't
their
matter.
intentions were.
It was identified in 1997 Anti-Terrorism Act as a possible weapon of mass destruction. It can't be in anyone's. Only the government can have it. You elected these guys. I ain't allowed to vote.
Chip, is that document about the national emergency in the book? Is that in your book?
But it's in the book. We have it in the book for everyone. As you pick up a book, the national emergency is there, folks.
If you want a copy, it's in the book that they have over there at their table. Okay, time.
I just want to ask a quick question. Couldn't they have planted that vial on him?
They can do anything that they want to
what he
do.
was saying to the public.
Yes, they could have.
Thank you very much, Chip. Have they